pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another original tag, but I feel a little silly about the number of... I'm becoming an original tag slut. This video just kind of leapt out at me when I was watching another BookTube video, and then I thought, well, I guess I could make it a tag. Maybe other people want to do it, but I really... I'm slutty in many other ways, but I don't want to be known as a BookTube original tag slut. So when I come up with a tag name, people usually laugh at how long it is, but I'm going to go with what came to me. It's the 10 most obscure books on my TBR tag. I was inspired to do this because I watched the other day, and I wish I had written down the name of the video because I think it too was a tag, but I was watching a book Olive talk about I think it was the 25 most popular books on her TBR, and she assessed them as being popular by sorting her TBR on Goodreads with the column number of ratings, which you can add to your... It's not a default column, but you can easily add it and then sort by that. And I enjoyed watching her video very much. I mean, Olive could talk about the phone books on her TBR and I would watch very happily. But as I was watching her, I was thinking, well, I'm much more interested in the obscure books on my TBR, so I'm going to use that same approach and talk about the 10 most obscure books. Obscure in terms of the fact that they have 0 ratings. Nobody's rated them on Goodreads, or they only have 1 rating. I don't mean 0 stars, or I don't mean 1 star. I mean nobody has even bothered to mark them as read or give them a rating of any kind. So that's what I'm going to tell you about. Here's my notes from the printout. So like I say, if you want to do it exactly the same way that I did it, you just have to add the number of ratings field to your display and then sort it by ascending or descending, and you're all good to go. But there's other ways you could pick them, right? Just walk through your bookshelves or use your own subjective selection. I've skipped any that were forthcoming books. I have a lot of books that Steve Donahue has told me about from his mail haul videos that I'm skipping because they don't have any ratings because they haven't been published yet. So otherwise, these are the 10. According to Goodreads, the most obscure book on my TBR is a book of photographs called George Duroy, The Photographs, and it was published in 2016. George Duroy, I believe he was a white photographer in New Orleans. He passed away 4 years ago at the age of maybe 80-something. And he was a painter, sculptor, photographer, and his subjects were usually his black boyfriends. He photographed black disabled men, whether those were ex-boyfriends or I don't know, but these are a series of photographs largely of gay, black, and disabled men, which just sounds beautiful. I think I looked at some of the pictures on the internet at the time that I added it to my TBR. It sounds really... Even just reading the synopsis on Goodreads just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. He sounds like he was a wonderful guy. The next most obscure book is called Waiting for Princess Margaret, a 2009 memoir by Emma Tennant. I added it because of the cover. There's the cover. And I'm a Princess Margaret aficionado. And after adding it, I read the new last year's biography by Craig Brown, Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret, and there's a lot about Emma Tennant and her half-brother Colin Tennant. They got up to they were crazy aristocrats and kind of falling all over themselves to ingratiate themselves with Princess Margaret. Colin Tennant's wedding gift to Princess Margaret was the plot of land on the island of Mustique, where she holidayed quite scandalously thereafter. And this is, I think, the 3rd volume of her memoirs. I don't think I necessarily want to read it, but it's on my TBR. But here's the thing I didn't know until I prepared to do this video. Emma Tennant is a novelist. Have you read? Do you know anything about her? Fiction? According to the Goodreads profile, she writes experimental novels that employ parody and rewriting. What does it mean to employ rewriting? Like, it's obviously not just rewriting the way any writer would edit their own material or whatever. What does it mean? And have you ever read any Emma Tennant novels? I'm curious. Number 3 is kind of a family history. Drowned, they said, a Métis history by Michael Nelson from 2011. And this one is published by a very small press in Canada. And I think I heard about it on Litsy, and I heard one glowing review, but it doesn't have any ratings on Goodreads. So this is about a family of Métis people in northern Ontario around Lake Superior, centering around the grandfather who died in 1947 by drowning in whatever the famous river is around there. I can't remember it now. But the family had a history with Red River resistance, so political opposition, Métis opposition to the federal colonial racist bullshit. And they were very involved in the fur trade, and it's one of the descendants kind of writing a family history. Sounds, I don't know what the writing's like, but it sounds really interesting. Métis is a peculiar Canadian word which originally meant mixed race, biracial, indigenous, and French, but now has a much more kind of legal and contested meaning, and I don't really understand it myself, and it's, for the purpose of this video, just use Google if you're interested in more details. But mixed race, half indigenous or part indigenous, part other stuff, is my very basic way of understanding it. So I already talked about Princess Margaret, so my guilty pleasure is I love reading royal biographies, royal history from Queen Victoria to the present. So I think there's 3 like that on the list. So I guess it's not a popular guilty pleasure. This one, I have a copy in a box somewhere in Canada. Prince Charming Goes West, the story of the EP Ranch by Simon Evans, 2001. This is about the British prince who became Edward VIII and then abdicated within 11 months because of his American girlfriend. But before he became king, he bought a ranch in Alberta, Canada. And he continued to own it for decades, and I don't know how often he visited it, but fairly regularly, once a year or so. And this is the history of that ranch, with lots of photographs of him and Wallace. Next is a biography of E.F. Benson called E.F. Benson and His Family and Friends by Gwen Watkins. And this is a publication of the E.F. Benson Society. It's published in 2003, but it sounds very staid. Now that I've read the description, I am currently rereading his masterpiece, Map and Lucia, with my good Canadian friend Leah of Litsy, and then we're going to buddy read a biography of him, The Life of E.F. Benson by Brian Masters. But this one is on my TBR, and it's, I guess, about his family and his friends. Oh, and speaking of E.F. Benson, I just got a comment from Britta Bowler on my Friday Reads, where I was talking about Map and Lucia, and she said, as most of you know, she writes mystery novels with she co-writes mystery novels under the pen name Britta Bolt, and the other half of her writing collaboration is Rodney Bolt. And she said in her comment to me that Rodney Bolt, her literary co-conspirator, has written a biography of E.F. Benson's mother. Well, that's immediately gone on my TBR, and it's called As Good as God, As Clever as the Devil, The Impossible Life of Mary Benson. Doesn't that sound incredible? Next is a Japanese novel, Sayonara Dream Eater, a 2007 novel by Ethne Ashizawa. Ethne doesn't sound like a Japanese name to me, but anyway, Ashizawa certainly is. And now that I've looked at it more carefully, I don't know what possessed me to add it to my TBR. I see almost exactly 2 years ago. The description doesn't sound all that great. It's about a mother-daughter relationship in Tokyo, set just before or during the time of the Kobe earthquake. I'd have to do the page 112 test on that one. Next is a work of Canadian literary history or cultural history. Apostate Englishman, Grey Owl, the Writer and the Myths by Albert Braz. 2015 book. I don't know if this is a biography. I think it's more of a history. Grey Owl was the foremost environmentalist of his era. He died in 1935, and he was known as at least half indigenous, but after he died, maybe he died in 1938, but around that time, after he died, it came out that he was not at all indigenous. He had been lying, and so his reputation took a nosedive. So this book is about all of that, and apparently argues that most of the high dudgeon about his deception was from racist Europeans rather than anybody that was offended about kind of cultural appropriation. I guess that's would be self-evident, but it sounded interesting at the time that I added it to my TBR about a year and a half ago. Next is, I think, the work of Canadian literature by Helen Weinsweg, A View from the Roof. These are short stories published in 2001. Helen Weinsweg was a late bloomer. Born in Poland, family immigrated to Canada. She married a classical music composer, I want to say. And I think her first fiction was published when she was in her 60s. And I have only ever read one of her stories, and it was in an Oxford anthology of Canadian short stories. And it was my favorite story in the book. And I've been wanting to collect and read all of her stuff. She only published about three, maybe four books, and this is one of them. Next one is another royal title, and I think Ange of Beyond the Pages might particularly be interested in this one. This is simply titled, this is a biography, and it's very simply titled Queen Victoria's Mother by Dulcie M. Ashdown. I don't know if you know anything about Queen Victoria's mother, but I'm going to tell you right now. She was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, born in 1786, died in 1861, married twice. Her second marriage was to Queen Victoria's father, the Duke of Kent, and he was briefly kind of in line for the succession of the throne, but he died before he could. And so then the daughter, who became Queen Victoria, became the next in line, and that was an all very complicated genealogical nightmare. But Princess Victoria, I'm going to just call her Queen Victoria's mother, she was a bit of a schemer, I think. I think various biographies I've read of Queen Victoria kind of paint her character in a different light, but she certainly was a schemer, and she collaborated with her secretary, who was very ambitious and scheming as well, Sir John Conroy, and they were engaged in a feud with her brother-in-law, King William IV. The daughter, the baby Victoria, who became Queen Victoria, was the next in line for the throne, but there was this intense feud between Queen Victoria's mother and Sir John Conroy with the king, and they were dissing the king and hoping that King William would die so that Queen Victoria's mother could become regent, and then Sir John Conroy could control her. So when that didn't work out, because by the time King William IV kicked the bucket, 1837, Victoria, who became Queen Victoria, this is getting complicated, Queen Victoria was 19, so she was not a minor, there was no regency, and she kicked her mother out of the house. And I think John Conroy even further. I don't think nobody ever heard from John Conroy after that, but she did reconcile with her mother a few years later. But she was not well treated by her mother and her mother's accomplice. So I want to read more about Queen Victoria's mother. Whew, getting all excited here. I'm geeking out. The 10th most obscure book on my TBR is a South African novel just published last year. It's called Bird Monk Setting, and I couldn't find any help with the pronunciation, so I'm going to do my best. The novelist is Lesego Rampolokeng. Lesego Rampolokeng. And this is his third novel, which paints a stark picture of life in a rural township 2 decades into South Africa's democracy. Sounds really interesting. I really am interested in South African literature. I'm not widely read, but a little bit more widely read than the average North American, perhaps. Always excited to hear about new Black South African writers. You can check him out. He's got a lot of performance art, poetry readings and stuff on YouTube. He's very colorful presence there, but I couldn't find out how to pronounce his name. So those are the 10 most obscure books on my TBR. How about yours? If you would like to do this tag, it's an open tag, please go ahead and do it. I am going to tag 4 people, but it's kind of random, but because I don't know who would be interested in doing this, but here they are. Amy Yuki Vickers, Bruno, Ange of Beyond the Pages, and Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventure. But anybody else, please give it a try. I'll be so curious to see what kind of books you have on your shelves or on your TBR. Thanks for watching.